Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
OOIDA's Executive Vice President recently participated in a panel discussion about understanding the needs of the trucking industry put on by the Eastern Transportation Coalition. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford speaks with the freight director of the coalition about the panel and the importance of hearing directly from those in the industry. Connecticut is dealing with an unusual problem on its highways. Four-wheelers driving the wrong way on interstates and other limited access roads. So how bad is the problem, and what is the state doing to combat it? Josh Morgan of the State Department of Transportation joins us to explain. On August 5th, trucks will line up in Indiana for a good cause. Alfred Sellers, the president of the convoy, comes on the show to explain. And finally, automated surveillance has passed from science fiction into cold, hard reality for truck drivers. Now, a federal agency has asked for feedback from the public on the issue, and OOIDA has given them an earful. I'll talk with Bryce Mungen of the association's Washington, D.C. office. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Mark. Truck parking is getting some attention from a news station in Texas. KXAN recently did an investigation into the lack of truck parking in the U.S. Michael Lombard is a truck driver and podcaster that often speaks with other drivers about the issue.
It remains one of the largest issues.
What is the problem with parking?
That there's not enough. I have drivers on my show who say, they're like, oh, Austin's the worst part of being on 35.
The investigation looked into truck drivers who park in residential neighborhoods, and Lombard told the TV station that it's not the drivers who do this that should be blamed.
I understand their plights, but they're pointing the fingers at the wrong people. Start calling their local leaders, their local representatives, as well as, their representatives in Congress.
Louis Pugh is executive vice president of OOIDA. He was interviewed for the piece. He spoke about the measures currently in place that would earmark $755 million over 3 years to construct truck parking across the nation.
If this passes, your municipality can put in a bid to the federal government to ask for some of this money to build a parking area for trucks, and it won't even cost your town anything.
OOIDA encourages everyone to contact their lawmakers and ask them to support the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. We have an update on some changes coming to fuel taxes around the country coming July 1st. California, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Missouri, and Virginia are all set to increase fuel taxes on diesel starting July 1st. The increases range from a penny a gallon up to 4 cents a gallon. On the flip side, Utah's fuel tax on diesel will drop by a little less than 2 cents a gallon. We have a complete update on landline.media. The body of a truck driver that went off the Chesapeake Bay Bridge last week has been identified. WAVY reports that 36-year-old Christopher A. Scott of Henrico, Virginia, was driving a tractor-trailer on Thursday when it crashed off the side of the bridge. A dive crew was able to recover his body on Friday. The article stated that he was survived by his mother, a host of brothers and sisters, and his 3 children. The youngest, a baby boy, was just born on Friday. Cross-border freight continues to increase in the trucking freight sector. According to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, more than $81 billion of truck freight was hauled across international borders in April. While that's almost a 10% decrease from March, it's still a 2% gain over April of 2022. The last time trucking cross-border freight experienced a year-to-year decrease was in February of 2021. Since then, it has been a 2-year streak of increases. The news isn't the same for all freight modes, however. Year to year, the total value of cross-border freight was $126 billion in April. That's down 6% from April of 2022 and down 10.5% from March. Those declines mark the second consecutive year-to-year declines in cross-border freight volumes. USF Holland has agreed to pay nearly $500,000 to settle a sex discrimination lawsuit dating back 3 decades. In a lawsuit filed in October of 2020, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission alleged that USF Holland had failed to hire female drivers at the Olive Branch terminal since it opened, except for one. That one female employee was fired before she completed her first route. The EEOC said it found in its investigation that a significant number of qualified women with extensive truck driving experience applied for positions over the years because of Holland's impressive benefits package. However, even when the women's qualifications were equal or superior to those of male applicants, Holland failed to hire them. The settlement includes a lump sum payment of $490,000, as well as a scholarship fund designed to help female applicants with the cost of Holland's apprenticeship program. We need to make a clarification from Friday's show regarding unified carrier registration fees. UCR fees are set to decrease by 9% next year. The reduction in annual registration fees will be from $4 to $3,453 per entity, depending on the number of vehicles owned or operated. All states are required to enforce UCR requirements, whether or not a state participates in it. From July 9th through the 15th, commercial vehicle enforcement and other officers across the U.S. and Canada will take part in Operation Safe Driver, an annual campaign during which they will look for unsafe driving behaviors by any vehicle, commercial or passenger. Jake Alovirta is the Director of Enforcement Programs at the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, which organizes the annual effort. He says that passenger vehicles are a big focus of the effort, including outreach.
We tend to focus more on the passenger vehicle in our operation with commercial motor vehicles. If you look at our public service announcements that we've been doing, we've been partnered and collaborating with CBS on a number of public service announcements for the last 3 years now. They tend to be centric around the passenger vehicles more so than the commercial drivers. You'll see commercials about highway safety quite a bit, particularly through NHTSA and such, where, you see the red and blue lights, the officers stopping you, and the different campaigns they do. This one is really more putting a focus on what the commercial driver deals with on the highway. We were fortunate over the last 3 years to get video footage from in-cab video from commercial motor vehicles showing just the issues of passenger car operation, following too closely, unsafe lane changes, cutting off or braking. And we've been able to kind of incorporate that into the PSAs, as well as use the commercial drivers to talk to the public about what they experience and the fact that they want to get home safely home every night, just like everybody else, and just the importance of paying attention in and around commercial motor vehicles.
We'll have more from Jake Alovirta on a future program. Again, Operation Safe Driver runs from July 9th through the 15th across North America. And finally, if you ever wondered what the ugliest dog in the world looked like, look no further. A 7-year-old Chinese crested dog named Scooter has officially been named the world's ugliest dog at an annual California contest. UPI reports the pup was born with backward hind legs. His owner was quoted saying she was overjoyed with the title, and that despite the challenges he has faced with his deformed hind legs, he has defied all odds, showing them the true meaning of resilience and determination. The World's Ugliest Dog contest aims to celebrate imperfect canines and encourage adoption of pets in need of good homes. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Next, Ashley Blackford speaks with Mary Grace Parker of the Eastern Transportation Coalition. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Every make, every model, in every corner of the country. Technical smarts and quality parts. That's how we roll. Bring your rig into TA Truck Service.
Landline Now, welcome back. The Eastern Transportation Coalition recently hosted a panel on trucking for the 2023 Freight Academy class. To speak with me about that, Mary Grace Parker joins me. She is director of the Freight Program. Mary Grace, can you start off by telling me what the Freight Academy is?
So it's essentially a 6-day, I'll call it an immersion program. So it's focused on bringing staff from departments of transportation, metropolitan planning organizations, port authorities, toll authorities, transportation-related agencies from different areas. So many of them are currently serving in planning positions. For freight also includes federal highway, other U.S. DOT agencies, again, that touch transportation. A lot of the folks that come to this are planning people that are responsible for federal and state freight planning at the metropolitan level. But we also bring in operations people. So those would be those folks that might work in the traffic management centers that are focused on another piece of public sector work beyond planning, which is operations work. How are we getting the message out? How are we managing events to get that road open, to keep it open, to make sure we're letting our users, in particular on our commercial vehicle side, know what's happening on our road? So they're coming to this program for 6 intensive days. They'll get an opportunity to see a lot of perspectives from the private sector's point. So that'll be shippers, receivers, manufacturing, industry professionals that are moving goods, manufacturing, distribution, warehousing. They'll also do a day-long trip to the Port of New York and New Jersey to get them the concept of how goods are moving through terminals and then into landside. An aviation day looking at air cargo, a day out in the Lehigh Valley region, which is, as you are familiar with, maybe is a very intensive, highly growing distribution and warehouse region. So again, thinking about how this is impacting land use, how it's impacting access. And finally, bringing in panels from different modal disciplines, rail, water, and in particular, a very strong importance is the trucking panel, because obviously we know that the number one users of modes of our particular highway system is in the trucking community. So the idea would be to give them an opportunity to hear how they use the system, what kind of challenges they face, what keeps them up at night, that transportation professionals who are handling planning, operation, policy, regulations want to consider as they're doing that work. They also expose them to some public sector professionals. In many cases, that's focused on bringing them together with people that are actually taking some of these challenges that they've heard from the industry and doing demonstrated initiatives that are actually resulting in changes or in improvements to modal use.
Now, there was a panel discussion recently. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. So one of our key panels of the week was our trucking panel, which brought together 3 really great perspectives. First, we had Louis Pugh, the executive vice president of OOIDA, really bringing that independent operator perspective. Jason Craig with C.H. Robinson, who brought in that sort of broker to trucking perspective. And then finally, last but not least, from Walmart, Ken Duncan, who is one of the ATA road team captains. So everything from large-scale companies that are running fleets, moving trucking, to a very strong perspective that we really like to promote, which is a very large volume of our region here in the East Coast in particular, but even nationally, is independent drivers. So understanding their decision wheel, their process of how they work is much different than looking at larger fleets that might have dispatchers and highly sophisticated systems. And then, of course, from the driver perspective, what is a driver face going out there? And certainly those topics ranged around one of the most prominent discussion items today, truck parking. So how are we meeting that challenge? A lot of emphasis on the need to increase capacity. We have to address this capacity issue on the public and the private side, as well as thinking about things like when you have events. So obviously we arrived on Sunday, June 11th, and that was also the day of the Philadelphia Bridge Fire. So bringing in that operational perspective when we think we're pushing out information on events, dynamic message signs, detours, closings, how are we putting that out to the industry? And do we truly understand how different segments of this trucking industry get this information or have challenges in getting this information, so we can bring that back to our operations center and really think about what's a better way to improve. Is it just pushing things out to third-party apps? Is it improving how we're doing some of our own message distribution? So I would say that was probably one of the most dynamic panels of the week. In fact, we continued them on through lunch. And we also gave them the opportunity to sort of turn the tables and ask the folks in the audience in this participation group. So how do you think are ways that we might address this? And what do you see are even some of the challenges within your own agencies? You know, is it a lack of having people in your agency outside the freight office understand this industry? You know, do you need to do your own work to be ambassadors internally to make sure that people that don't touch freight every day but have jobs that impact freight understand the way it works, and in particular with respect to trucking?
And I think you touched on this in the first question I asked, but who did the panel speak to?
Our class was 38 participants, and again, they range from staff working from Federal Highway, U.S. DOT agencies to state DOTs across the corridor, and we had several state DOTs from outside our region, as well as metropolitan planning organization staff, again, that are involved at that metropolitan level with creating freight plans. We had some staff from the Port Authority, New York and New Jersey, in the air cargo facilities, as well as the port. We also had some staff that came to us from the other modal areas. So not some folks were rail staff, some folks were freight planning staff. So a nice mixture across the board. And that provides them also a wider perspective among themselves as participants. So one of the things that they have to do is after they complete this week, to give them capstone problems on a series of topics. So, two of the groups are dealing with a capstone project on truck parking, and other groups looking at resiliency. So they continue that peer networking and idea exchange that we hope they build on throughout the corridor nationally as they continue to go forward from this week and this work that they do together.
From your perspective, what were some of the takeaways that you learned that maybe you didn't know before after this panel?
So, I think even for myself, I've been engaged in this area a long time. Certainly from the panel of the trucking perspective, we talk a lot about truck parking. What are some of the ways we can address this issue? We talked a lot about when you build these facilities and you get this federal money, we still have to think about how they're going to continue to operate when that federal grant money that builds them is gone. So hearing from the panel talk about the importance of, what kind of things need to be in these facilities, right? Making sure we have good lighting, bathroom and comfort station care, but also how do we make sure that we plan for when we have larger events? Again, we tend to push information out within our borders, but a lot of these decisions, particularly this group, is a takeaway. Again, in the midst of it, as you know, the Philadelphia fire is, we needed to be making sure that trucks in particular were hearing about this beyond the border of Pennsylvania. And that is something that we work in our quarter. That was a really strong message that my decision about needing to figure out where I'm going to park on any day is a challenge. But certainly at a time like this, when there's a major closure, it's going to add to my drive time. How do I figure out where that's happening and how do I know about that? And also, quite frankly, hearing some really good perspectives that are sometimes misleading when we hear how truckers get their information, and having people think that there's this sophisticated way that everybody has some type of dispatch system or some great device in their car that automatically gives them a succinct message, when, as Louis pointed out, you're not allowed to touch your phone. You have to be hands-free to remain legal. But how do I get that prompt? And for us to go back and think about ways that those prompts, whether we're working with third parties, I think one of the examples I heard was an Amber Alert pops up on my phone. Why can't that Philadelphia closure pop up that same way so I can see it without having to touch it? So I think that's a really important understanding. And again, it's the diversity of this industry, right? Not everybody has a dispatcher, and not everybody has sophisticated equipment in their trucks. So really, that to me was a really big takeaway, to go back and continue for us to think about diversity of how we get information out. And it's not every single trucking unit's going to get it the same way. So how do we surmount that? I thought that was a really important takeaway to really understand in this group. It's not just push the message out and everybody gets it. and even some things we talked about in terms of as we're looking at, more and more emphasizing move over requirements, how can we work to make sure that we do a better job of trying to educate the public that when I move my truck over into a lane because I'm approaching a location that I know I have to move over and give that lane up, how can we do some better things about getting back to some of those discussions and teaching passenger cars how to do a better job of sharing the road with trucks? Because we've all seen a truck move over in a lane and some passenger car running down that cleared lane trying to beat them and cutting them off. So again, understanding that part of that education goes back to continue focus on educating everybody on sharing the road, and especially with these professional truck drivers. They're not the ones that are often the issues in these events. It's often happening by something that was set in motion. So can we do more work on getting back to discussions on things like no zone and sharing the road and understanding the dynamics of a truck's ability to slow down in a queue? So those are all, I think, really important messages that we need to keep emphasizing.
And lastly, can you talk to me more about the program? Where do the graduates typically go after they've completed the program?
They're back at their agencies, picking up that work that they're already doing. Again, some of our support staff for the freight planning division, some of them, again, are working in traffic management centers as key operations personnel. So they're back at their agency, continuing that work forward. What's been really exciting to me, this class will join about 220 previous graduates over since 2008 when we started this program. It's a biannual program with a little bit of a disruption, post-pandemic. But they go back to those agencies, and what's really rewarding is to not only see the work that they do and how much it changes their thinking, but many of them have gone on to become the leading freight people in their agency or in other agencies and entities across the country. So they continue to grow not only in their thinking and in their program applications, but also grow professionally and get into what I think are more even influential positions that bring a mindset of understanding freight and particularly trucking to those kinds of discussions.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that I may have missed?
I think the biggest thing that I would add is the success of this program is based on two things. It's having the private sector willing to come to us and talk to us and be honest about what kind of challenges they have, but in a very obviously constructive way, but at the same time challenging us to not continually tell us what's wrong, but to see some results. So I think that ability to have people in the room that in this sort of, we called it turn the tables, could talk about some initiatives, they're trying to put forth in their agency or test the waters. To me, that's a really key issue is for this program to be successful, we not only want to train these people, but we also want to see them go out and really try to make a difference. And that helps our industry partnership because, we don't need to ask the trucking community, for example, 100 more times what kind of information they need. They've already been telling us weather, road closures. How do we do a better job or step on and leverage entities that have figured out better ways to do those things? So to me, that's a key part of this program is the back and forth and that willingness of the industry to want to come to us with a belief that we're earnest in our desire to have these professionals understand their needs, understand their challenges, and want to go back and be diligent in addressing them.
That was Mary Grace Parker, Director of the Freight Program with the Eastern Transportation Coalition. To learn more about the Eastern Transportation Coalition, you can visit tetcoalition.org. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
You trust PrePass for more bypasses? Now let PrePass help with tolls. PrePass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Landline Now. Welcome back. The state of Connecticut is dealing with an unusual problem on its highways. Four-wheelers driving the wrong way on interstates and other limited access roads. In fact, the state has seen a 500% increase in the number of wrong-way accidents. Notably, none were caused by tractor-trailers, but the incidents represent a danger to all highway users. Josh Morgan, a spokesman for the State Department of Transportation, says his agency is taking significant steps to clamp down on the problem.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen a dramatic increase in wrong-way crashes, wrong-way fatalities here in Connecticut. Last year in 2022, we had 23 people killed on our roadways as a result of wrong-way driving. So that's really accelerated our efforts to install some new technology on our ramps to try to stop these crashes from happening.
Does the department have an idea as to why Connecticut is seeing so many of these?
Impairment. I mean, it takes a while for accident reconstruction investigations to play out. But, the data that we have here shows that more than 80% of the drivers who are causing these wrong-way crashes are impaired by alcohol. It's a serious problem, something that we're trying to address. We're certainly going to do our part from an engineering and education standpoint. But the biggest thing that would be helpful for us is if people drove sober every time they got behind the wheel.
Okay. I wonder if you can describe for us what the state's doing in response to this. Go ahead and walk us through the state's plan.
Yeah, so we're installing wrong-way detection devices at high-risk ramps around Connecticut. For your listeners, Connecticut is a very developed state. We have more than 700 ramps across our state, so people maybe around the country, that have exits, 5, 10, 15 miles apart, that may be 20 exits here in Connecticut. So we have a lot of on-ramps, a lot of off-ramps. So we looked at more than 700 and came up with a list of more than 200, which we are calling high risk. High risk because the on-ramp and the off-ramp are right next to each other. High risk because they are near bars, restaurants, or places that are serving alcohol, or perhaps there's not a lot of illumination on the roadway. So we're going down this list, starting with the highest risk ramps, installing this wrong-way detection technology. So they are wrong-way signs that have flashing red LED lights on top of them. The way they are activated is there's a camera mounted on a nearby pole or a light post that is projecting down an invisible grid onto the highway ramp. Cars that are heading in the correct direction aren't going to trigger that, aren't going to turn the lights on. But if a vehicle breaks the plane going in the wrong direction, that's what's going to activate those lights and hopefully stop the vehicle from entering and continuing onto the highway in that wrong direction. The technology also that we're installing will have an alert that will notify our Highway Operations Center here at the DOT, as well as the local Connecticut State Police Barrack. So the hope is that this added layer of detection and alert and notification, that if someone does continue on the highway, that police will be able to intercept that vehicle before it's too late.
Has the department done this at other locations in the state?
Yeah, so our first location, we piloted a spot back in 2020. So before we had this huge spike in 2022, so we actually had our first ramp online about 3 years ago. We have 17 ramps currently active here in Connecticut. Understanding the problem and the challenge facing us, we're on a 2-track path now. So we are doing some of this work in-house with our electricians, our maintainers, our staff who are out there installing these and testing these with our traffic signal lab. And then the other path is actually hiring contractors, putting out a project, bidding it, and having independent contractors do this work. There is just no way that our staff has the capacity to knock down all these ramps in a timely fashion, but they're doing what they can, and then we're going to supplement with contractors because we have a lot more ramps we need to get to.
How effective has the system been in the places where it has been installed?
We actually tested a location here in Southington, Connecticut along Queen Street. When we were out there testing it, running tests in the morning, running tests at night, making sure that the system is working, our crews actually saw a driver get onto the highway and stop and self-correct themselves. The thing about wrong way driving is we know where these crashes happen. We don't always know where the person is getting on the highway. The unfortunate truth is that people could be doing this more frequently than we realize and just traveling down the highway for however long they're going and then just getting off. I guess the good thing is that they're doing that safely. We're not getting reports of crashes, injuries, or fatalities. But we're trying to get these out on ramps that we know could be problematic. We know that are high risk, and hopefully we'll get some data back, in the years ahead that show that we've really made a difference and we've really cut down on these types of crashes because they're not like any other crash. Talking to our state troopers, our first responders, these crashes are horrific. They are high speed, they are head on, and they are just absolute carnage on the highway. So responding to these crashes, clearing up these crashes is something we definitely need to cut down on. We need to stop these things from happening.
What other actions is the state contemplating to deal with the number of wrong-way drivers?
So we're looking at a few different things. So we actually launched a public awareness campaign. It's called One Wrong Move. So we have TV ads, radio ads, social media, digital billboards, actually showing what a wrong-way crash looks like. A lot of times with advertisements, it always cuts away at the last second. You never see the crash. You never hear the crash. Our visual assets are impactful in that they're showing what two cars crashing head-on actually look like after the fact. So we're continuing that education outreach. We're looking at other technologies, reflective inlaid pavement markers, so actually outlining the directional arrows on our ramps. So if you're heading in the right direction, you really won't notice it. It'll just continue to glow white. But if you're heading in the wrong direction, they would actually illuminate red. So red signage, red pavement markings, red reflectors on the guide rails separating our ramps, trying to put out as many visual cues as possible. And actually part of legislation that passed this current session, which just ended earlier this week here in early June here in Connecticut, the University of Connecticut is going to be partnering with us testing reverse rumble strips. Rumble strips are used in a lot of different applications, most notably on the sides of interstates and freeways. Your listeners may be familiar with those if they're pulling off to the side of the road. We use them here in Connecticut quite a bit on the center line, so that the yellow line is separating travel lanes on the roadway. What we're going to be looking at is putting these at select off-ramps. So again, if you are heading in the right direction, you won't necessarily feel that vibration in your vehicle. But if you're getting on the highway in the wrong direction, your car should vibrate. Again, looking at as many visual or auditory type clues and alerts to try to stop somebody from heading onto the highway in that wrong direction.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Just another reminder for the public, for anyone listening, please don't get behind the wheel if you've been drinking, if you've been using cannabis, even if you are using legally prescribed prescription drugs. Any of these things could really impact your ability to operate a motor vehicle. Our data here is startling, and the sad truth is that these crashes were preventable. The lives lost were preventable if people were just paying attention, if they were driving sober. So we just need people to remember that when they get behind the wheel, to do so safely, to do so sober. Otherwise, they could honestly kill themselves, kill somebody else, and that's something we just need to see stop happening here in Connecticut and across the country for sure.
Josh Morgan, a spokesman for the Connecticut Department of Transportation, talking about a rash of wrong-way auto drivers on the state's highways. On August 5th, trucks will line up in Indiana for a good cause. It's the Southern Indiana Truck Convoy, and it benefits the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Alfred Sellers, the president of the convoy, explains.
It's a truck convoy to benefit Make-A-Wish. I got the idea from one I participate in over in Mattoon, Illinois, and some drivers and I, along with my wife, we started this last year, and it took off pretty good support. So we're doing it again this year. And last year we had 52 trucks in it, and we were able to donate $17,000 and starting from zero.
Okay. And when and where is this going to take place this year?
At the Ripley County Fairgrounds in Osgood, Indiana, we're kind of on southeast Indiana. We're about 20 miles from Batesville, Indiana, about 40 miles from Seymour, Indiana, 50 miles from Cincinnati.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of causes that you could have benefited here. Why in particular the Make-A-Wish Foundation?
It's a good cause. Right now, I just found out the other day that in southern Indiana, there's 60 critically ill children waiting for a wish to be granted. And last I heard, it was over $10,000 for a wish to be granted. And a critically ill child doesn't have much time a lot of times, and I like to make their lives as best as they can.
Okay. What is your goal for this year?
To donate more than we did last year and have more trucks.
That's a good one. Is there anything else going on in conjunction with the convoy?
We have different trophies we give out for the driver who traveled the furthest, the oldest working truck, and various different things. We'll have music and band. We'll have a silent auction, activities for the kids. We're having a tug of war. It's a manpower tug of war, not truck tug of war. And there'll be hopefully participants for that. And one thing that's kind of unique about it, through pestering, we've got the Indiana DOT to lead our convoy for us again this year. And it's pretty neat seeing all those trucks chase down a DOT officer.
Kind of reverse of what it normally is.
Yeah, kind of let them see how it feels.
Well, great. Well, is there anything else, Alfred?
Just if anybody wants to follow along, we have a Facebook page, Southern Indiana Truck Convoy. We have a web page, sitconvoy.org. Follow along, come out and be a part of it. It's a good day, fun event. We get to see, last year I got to see drivers I haven't seen in years, talk to on the phone on occasion, but you really don't run into them much. And it was a good time had by all.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your time. I sure appreciate it.
Well, thank you for putting us on the air about it.
Again, that was Alfred Sellers, president of the Southern Indiana Truck Convoy. Once again, the event is scheduled to take place August 5th at the Ripley County Fairgrounds in Osgood, Indiana. Registration for the event is now open and all types of trucks are encouraged to join. The price to join the convoy is $50 per truck, with an auction being held to buy the chance for your truck to drive in the first, second, third, or caboose positions. The winners of those auctions will be given a special banner to place on their trucks during the convoy. The winner of the first place position will have their truck featured on the convoy's website, flyers, and Facebook page. We'll have a link to the website, sitconvoy.org, and their Facebook page on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the headline or photo in the red box and you can find all the email addresses, websites, and phone numbers we mention on the show. Again, that's at landlinenow.com. Meanwhile, some other upcoming truck shows on the calendar. The Texas Trucking Show takes place June 24th and 25th at the NRG Center in Houston. The Big Rig Roundup is scheduled for June 30th and July 1st at Voss Park in Butterfield, Minnesota. The Southern Idaho Valley Truck Show is scheduled for the same dates at the Twin Falls County Fairgrounds in Twin Falls, Idaho. And the Walcott Truckers Jamboree will take place July 13th, 14th, and 15th at the Iowa 80 Truck Stop in Walcott, Iowa. You can find links to more details and other truck shows coming up at landline.media. Just go to Resources and click on Truck Show Calendar of Events. We'll be back in a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Automated surveillance, the use of electronic equipment to keep a watch on workers, has passed from science fiction into cold, hard reality for those who make their living behind the wheel of a truck. Now, a federal agency has asked for feedback from the public to, quote, better understand automated surveillance and management of workers, and OOIDA has given them an earful. Here to discuss the association's comments on the issue and more is Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you doing?
Mark, I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Let's start with this. What agency is asking for comments here, and what is their function in the government?
Yeah, so this is one that, to be honest, I wasn't incredibly familiar with before, but it's the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And, as I kind of figured out, it seems like this is something that was stood up basically, through the executive branch and through the White House. So this is not quite the same as like the Department of Transportation or the Environmental Protection Agency or the other executive agencies that we're used to dealing with. This is kind of a, more specific in purpose, but it's also kind of more broad in a sense of what it's looking at. So it is focused mostly, though, on, technology issues, things like that.
Okay. And I did mention at the beginning somewhat what they're asking for, but I wonder if you can get a little bit more specific in terms of what they're asking for and why they're asking.
Yeah, so they start out with by acknowledging that employers are using more and more automated technologies and systems to monitor, to evaluate, and to manage their workers. And they say that this can have potentially good effects or benefits for those employers and maybe employees. Maybe it'll help with supply chain management, can help with business decisions, things like that. But they also recognize that these systems can pose risks to workers, whether it's their health, whether it's to employment opportunities, privacy, workplace accommodations, or kind of any other way that you could think of employers might want to misuse this data. So what they're looking for is feedback from, workers, employees, employers on how this information is used, what's been workers' experience with this type of surveillance. So it's a pretty broad request for information that they put out.
A big part of what OOIDA had to say focused on ELDs, electronic logging devices. Broadly speaking, what was the association's message about ELDs and their effect on truckers?
Yeah, when I read this, it's like, well, if the federal government wants to learn more, think more about automated surveillance of workers in the trucking industry, they don't have to look much further than what Congress and the federal agencies have done with their requiring and implementing electronic logging device. So really, we wanted to point out to them, here's an example of a technology that's mandated by the government that tracks workers down to the second. It tracks when they're moving, what type of movement they're doing, vehicle miles, location, and all the other information that is mandated by the electronic logging device mandate.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the effect on safety, because that's a big part of this is they're looking at what effect it has on workers, and of course safety is a big part of that. What has been the effect of safety of ELDs?
Yeah, so we hear time and time again from our members how ELDs create stress, how it puts them, on the clock to find parking in time to meet federal rest break requirements. And it's not just driver's experience and what we hear from them, but it's in the safety data. When we look at the crash rates from before the ELD mandate went into effect and after the ELD mandate went into effect, we see that the trend has not been positive. It's gotten a little bit worse over the past few years. When you kind of try and take into account some of the effects of the pandemic and some of the kind of weird things that happened there. But other than that, it has not helped improve roadway safety. And this is at a time when compliance improves. So maybe ELDs are great for compliance. Maybe they're great for trying to obey all the little rules. But what should be the ultimate goal of any kind of rule or mandate? Should it be just helping you stay in compliance with other rules, or should it be to actually improve safety on the road? So that was one of the big points that we highlighted in our comments.
And of course, you kind of refer to a few things there, but there's been more effects on drivers beyond safety, of course.
Yeah, and I think it's just the broader invasion of privacy that drivers can feel because of these ELDs. And one of the things that we made sure to point out was that ELD mandate is the bare minimum of what's required to be installed on a truck. But there aren't very many ELD manufacturers that are just doing that bare minimum. On the contrary, a lot of large carriers were using ELDs for fleet management tools before the mandate took effect. And so, they don't want to just use it for tracking hours. They want to use it to track how fast is a driver going. Are they braking hard? Are there other things that drivers are doing that maybe they don't want them to do or want to be able to nitpick or second-guess drivers for? So the ELD offer this foot in the door for electronic surveillance in trucks, but now that it has to be there, it's kind of like, well, why don't we just do all these things since this device is already there?
And of course, the main purpose of ELDs, as stated in the regulation, was strictly to monitor compliance, but it really has been a matter of function creep, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely, yes. And that's the point. We get into that a little bit later. The FMCSA is considering expanding the ELD mandate to older trucks, potentially expanding it to require other information be recorded by the ELD, require that the information be recorded at more frequent intervals. So absolutely, now that has, foot in the door, camel's nose under the tent, whatever metaphor you want to use, but now that that's been put in place, it's like, well, what else can we do with this? One of the things we always fight about and have to push back on is truck vehicle miles traveled tax. We've seen that, let's just tax truckers for the vehicle miles they drive, and we'll use ELDs because they're already on trucks. So once you put it on there, it's just people always trying to find a way to use it for something else.
The Associated noted, and you've mentioned one of these, but 2 open rulemakings underway dealing with automated surveillance in addition to the existing ELD mandate. You mentioned eliminating the ELD exemption for pre-2000 trucks, but there's another one that really has some privacy implications. I wonder if you can describe that.
Yeah, so the quickest way to describe it is requiring trackers on truckers so that law enforcement can identify any and every truck that's going down the road. The idea with this rulemaking is to require all trucks to be fitted with a transponder that would broadcast out information, and it would be able to be pulled off by law enforcement by some sort of receiver. So it would have information like, motor carrier number, but they're also talking about, do we want to have information on hours of service, on whether the driver is up to compliance with their medical certification. So again, we're just talking about, let's just slap another piece of technology on that's capable of giving out all sorts of information, and we know that's not where it's going to stop.
We just have a few seconds left, Bryce, but what is the next step for this information collection request? What is likely to result from it?
Yeah, we'll see. I'm sure that the Office of Science and Technology Policy will put some sort of reports or findings out, but it's not clear that this is going to lead to any rulemaking at this time.
Okay. Well, Bryce, thank you very much for the information. We sure appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
I've been talking with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. And as always, folks, we encourage you to call your members of Congress about these important issues. And you can do that by dialing up the U.S. Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or write a letter using the website fightingfortruckers.com. That's our show for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm. I'm a veteran. I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome. And I am a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.